Everyone, so much for joining us today for this incredible Lunch and Learn with SWOP Behind Bars. We have Alex Andrews and Melanie Dante with us today. I'm so excited for this conversation and thank you all for joining us. My name is Rachel McKinnon. I'm PAVE's Outreach Director. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I want to give you just a little bit of background about PAVE before we jump in. So PAVE is unique in the fact that we work on both the preventative and the educational side, and also the healing and empowering survivors to thrive after trauma. We take a positive approach to engage people of all genders to be part of the solution to end gender-based violence. Part of the reason that Melanie and Alex are here today, they are one of our Survivor Outreach Center partners, which is a new coalition that we started about a year ago. Everyone, if you want to check out survivors.org, that is where all of our coalition members are listed in our database. We have been building the coalition for the past year, and we have confirmed over 800 partners nationwide at this point, including everyone who aids in healing and supporting survivors, and also just lawyers, holistic healers, and nonprofit organizations. So there are a couple different ways to get involved with PAVE if you want to get involved. We have 3 amazing new committees that we're starting. So the Survivor Support Committee, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and a legislative committee working to change laws surrounding survivors and gender-based violence. Also, we have PAVE chapters. You can start a high school, college, or community-based chapter. We have social media ambassadors or PAVE ambassadors, and we are also accepting applications for new members on our board of directors. So with that being said, thank you again all so much for being here today, and I will turn it over to our lovely presenters to introduce themselves.
Hi, thank you. My name is Alex Andrews. I am the Executive Director of the Sex Worker Outreach Project, Behind Bars. Our primary focus is to provide services and support for people who are incarcerated, are being released from jail or prison, or are at risk of incarceration for trading sex or for sex trafficking, which is very often, unfortunately, we have a lot of sex trafficking survivors and victims that are arrested during the course of a lot of the human trafficking stings. So that is our primary mission, is to provide services and support. But we do run a national hotline for it's the SWOP Community Support Line. It's been in existence for about 7 years now. We have gone from getting about 6 calls a week to about 150 to 200 calls a week, which is a lot of calls. It's been some of the best work that I've ever been involved with. I enjoy the provision of the community support line and having a safe place where people who identify as sex workers, sex trafficking survivors, or victims feel like they can call and be empowered to take control of their own life and advocate for themselves. I think it's really important that we provide people with the tools they need and let them take the paths that they take at their own way. I'm here today with Melanie Dante, who is just the most fabulous case manager on the planet. She's been with us for the last 4 or 5 years, I think. And she's just absolutely amazing. I love her in every way. And she's so knowledgeable and incredibly helpful. Melanie?
Wow. Thank you, Alex. It's going to be hard to actually step into that. Wow. So yes, I was introduced to Alex in 2016 by Bella Robinson at Coyote, Rhode Island. We began working together in a volunteer capacity in 2017. And most of the work I did was with communications, educational outreach, heavily involved with the memorials for International Trans Remembrance Day and International Day to End Violence Against Sex Workers. I was completely taken by surprise when they brought me on board for training in case support and case management in January. I have been diligently working to step up to the tasks at hand, which are increasing much more so, exponentially more so, and with much more complexity than I would have presumed 5 years ago. I will say that passion at this point now is balancing with reason, and we're having to really figure out the coalitions that can help with solutions to problems that are coming up daily and in ways that none of us were really expecting. especially with the increase in violence that has come up over the last couple of years. It has been very rewarding work, but at the same time also at times heartbreaking. So today is June 2nd. The Lunch and Learn was a wonderful opportunity to be able to introduce one of the calendar days that sex worker rights organizations and sex workers acknowledge. International Sex Workers Day, which is a more polite way of saying what the day was originally defined as, is held on June 2nd to mark the 1975 occupation of a church in Lyon, France. Approximately 100 sex workers, who at that point were defined as wives and mothers and community members and not as sex workers, were protesting their criminalized and exploitive conditions. There had been a number of women who had disappeared, and when their friends and peers were reporting their missing, them as missing, the women were fined and threatened and eventually imprisoned. They realized is that the law enforcement in that area was complicit with the disappearances of the women who were working within the weave of their community. During the day, they were known as wives and as mothers and as working class women, that they were actually working within a syndicate system, and there was great exploitation. So that 1975 occupation was the beginning of the international sex workers' rights movement, which is why I thought it would be very fitting to use a slide that I created referencing the global network of sex work projects. NSWP is a global research and think tank that watches over and collects the voices of sex workers, sex worker rights organizations, and academics seeking to improve the public discourse on topic. Their consensus statement for the day covers 8 areas of human rights that they feel are integral. It's the right to associate and organize. A lot of people don't realize that for sex workers to gather at one point and even at this time can be conspiratorial. So for the workers to be able to associate, to even discuss the issues that are at hand, that has been something that people have had to work very hard and fight for. There's the right to be protected by the law. And that is that sex workers have not been able to report violent crimes. So it's a very new turn of events where in California recently, finally sex workers are able to report violent crimes along with carry condoms, which were used as instruments of crime if they were to have any kind of public discussion with police. And if they had the condoms on them, it would be the equivalent of a reason to be able to do a full search and seizure and then be arrested. The right to be free from violence is the right to report crimes and the right to have those crimes be something that is punishable by law. In many areas, if a sex worker reports a violent crime, it is not considered to be a priority. They don't have the voice to be able to report those crimes and have them taken seriously. The right to be free from discrimination, to be able to enter into establishments, to have housing. The right to privacy and the freedom from arbitrary interference, such as having condoms taken away and used as instruments of crime or telephones used as instruments of crime. They have the right to health and to health care, the right to move and migrate, and the right to work and have free choice of employment. These areas are under attack in different countries in different ways. And on International Sex Workers Day, it is a time where people from different cultures and communities gather virtually and literally to be able to share the voice of the problems that are happening within their areas. Now, SWOP Behind Bars created a presentation for the International Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference in Toledo, Ohio. We updated this presentation to be able to really clarify for today what is a growing area. It's called the VIMINAL space, and it is meaning the victim and the criminal. The victim and criminal stuck in the middle is the status which, with the changing of many laws, sex workers are finding themselves defined as. And are we able to play the presentation now?
Can you see the presentation, Melanie?
Right now, the only thing I see is the slide, actually.
June 2nd, or do you want, is this one the one that you're looking for?
We would be playing the PowerPoint, which is the VIMINAL in the middle. Yep. And so first we'll explain the Sex Workers Outreach Project Behind Bars is an extension of Sex Workers Outreach Project, the national grassroots social justice network dedicated to the fundamental human rights of sex workers and their communities. Founded in 2016, SWOP Behind Bars carries the mission to further to engage with currently and formerly incarcerated individuals who have traded sex. SWOP Behind Bars uses a harm reduction framework to offer resources, community building projects, educational programs, and advocacy striving to end violence and stigma. The victim criminal caught in the middle, the VIMINAL. Well, so services and support for the people trying to survive in the sex trade or exit the sex trade, whether that choice is by choice or coercion, it falls short of the expectations and sustainable needs. People are asking for help in ways that we are unexpectedly not able to easily provide. Sometimes that's in the form of toiletries, sometimes that is in the form of housing, short and long-term resources. It is not until people attempt to reach out for help and we try to find resources that we really understand how much stigma there is. And the issues: access to services, stigma, gender identity, criminal records, substance abuse, trauma, age, race, class. All of these are factors that service providers struggle with in trying to get the resources to the people who are in need of them. And right now, sex workers have diverse needs relating to exit and aid. Some of what I've done here is show some of the voices that are coming in from our actual hotline. And with that, what we see is that COVID has had a major impact on the ability for people to earn money and access resources, to feel safe, and to be able to take care of their basic needs. We also have an increase in workers who are HIV positive, who are no longer able to discreetly and privately fulfill their needs. We are finding that from basic housing and access to medication to being able to keep bills on and travel to where they will feel safe, people are looking for resources that definitely do take coalitions and alliances between organizations and regions. So evaluating risk and harm. Right now, at the intersection of sex work and sex trafficking, there's the challenge with the criminalization factor, which is why there is a huge push for decrim. Most people will understand decrim defined as the Nordic model, but sex workers actually prefer the New Zealand model. The New Zealand model is something that allows for them to interact with their communities. That said, the differences between sex work and sex trafficking: sex work is adult and consensual. It's free from force, fraud, and coercion, and equal exchange of labor. Many workers find sex work empowering, where people can freely make choices that impact the outcome. There's a bodily autonomy factor when one is doing work that they feel that they are engaged in and empowered by. Sex trafficking: force, fraud, coercion of an adult or minor, abuse, trauma, exploitation, uncompensated labor, and a lack of control over one's body and decisions. SWOP Behind Bars and most of the affiliated nonprofits use what would be defined as a harm reduction model. Harm reduction is usually defined in terms of substance abuse. We apply it to sex work with a similar philosophy. According to Harm Reduction International, harm reduction refers to policies, programs, and practices that aim to minimize negative health, social, and legal impacts that are associated with criminalized activities and behaviors. When harm reduction is applied to sex work, it takes on that views trading sex for money and resources are a consensual choice. It focuses on who people are rather than what they do, meaning each situation is individual and unique to itself. Harm reduction recognizes the myriad of reasons why people engage in the sex trade, seeking to help people meet goals as defined for themselves in non-judgmental and compassionate ways. Harm reduction recognizes the potential for infectious disease and physical safety consequences, meaning that reaching out and being preventive in harm reduction capacity to help to minimize potential injury or harm from STIs, hepatitis, HIV, or from violence. Harm reduction seeks to provide holistic support rather than isolated interventions. And this is where we're all learning to get to know each other better so that we can figure out how to actually be a benefit to those who are in need. Harm reduction highlights that the criminal justice response to sex work has had on the sex trade highlights that the impact that the criminal justice response to sex work has had on people in the sex trade and seeks to eliminate socio-political barriers to care, safety, and general well-being. This is where behavioral health and social services are coming into play alongside of the criminal justice system in a reformative manner. Harm reduction believes that incorporating a diverse range of sex workers into public health policies and discussions can be a gateway into community health betterment. Those who have been there can contribute their voice and their experiences to say what has worked and what hasn't for them, to see what can actually produce better change and eradicate factors that were creating problems. Harm reduction understands that one individual experience does not equal that of all individuals. And though the collective voice creates a large tapestry, that each individual experience is unique. This model is new. It's defined as a public health response initiative as opposed to criminal justice response. So SWOP Behind Bars exists to fill the void in services and support. The need is real and has been growing each year since the FOSTA SESTA legislation. SWOP Behind Bars allies with criminal justice organizations and allied nonprofit entities to navigate individuals through the current complex systems of sex work and sex traffic reform. This has not been an easy task, but one that everybody has worked very hard to step up to, learning how to work with each other in new and improved ways daily. And that is why we are very, very pleased that we were able to participate in today's Lunch and Learn, Rachel. For more information, you can check out the website, which is swopbehindbars.org. You can also contact either Alex or myself directly.
So one of the things that we wanted to directly address, and one of several things, but violence against women, violence against people who are involved in the sex trade is very, very real. A lot of people don't realize, but people who have been sexually assaulted and have also been engaged in trading sex are often dismissed by police officers, or when they try to report it. It's not uncommon, or it's not been uncommon in the past, for people who are sexually assaulted. They may go to a hospital or to a local victim service center, and when they report it, they will inform the police, and then the police will target them for harassment and intimidation, and want to know more and all that sort of thing. We really want to believe that law enforcement is making efforts to change some of this really bad behavior, but we can't honestly say that that has ceased. This is one of the reasons why we really like the New Zealand model. And they are even making changes to that to expand it so that it is more encompassing to migrant workers and people who are immigrants to New Zealand. But in the New Zealand decriminalized sex work, I think about 16 years ago. And one of our co-founders from SWOP Behind Bars spent 90 days in New Zealand talking with sex workers and asking them questions for a study on the impact of criminalization on violence. And what she found is when she would ask these sex workers, so are you afraid of the police? They would give her kind of this like weird look and kind of tilt their head and say, why would we be afraid of the police? And that's a complete shift from what we experience in the United States. And that is something that we would really like to see more of, is we would like to see fewer people be involved in I completely lost my train of thought when someone comes in the middle to try to kiss me hello. That is something that we would really like to expand, is we would like people to be less afraid of police, but we would also like police to be give us less reasons to fear, I guess. That would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I've had people be very surprised when I've shared that workers with whom I've spoken are more afraid of the police than of pimps and predators. That statement seems to completely, throw people for a loop. And usually people will say that they are more afraid or more concerned about the police than pimps and predators. We'd like for people to have no concerns except for, what they want to wear that day, or, what they're going to eat. And that's part of it, is to be able to figure out how to interact with the concerns of who is actually a problem, and how we can start to dissolve those problems. Is that accurate, Alex?
That's it exactly. I know that we have someone that commented in the chat about force, fraud, and coercion not having to be present in the case of minors. This is very true. Anyone under the age of 17 and 364 days is considered a trafficking victim, and they are provided with services in a lot of states, which are safe harbor laws. In the state of Florida, and I'm using that as an example because I live here, the safe harbor law was actually enacted in 2012, but the law itself and the provisions that it made there within it did not include funding until 2017. So when we pass laws that mean that we're not going to arrest juveniles, we're not going to prosecute them, we're not going to put them behind bars, we have to realize that very often when they are out involved in trading sex as minors, they might be leaving an abusive situation. They might be in a lot more danger than what we know about, and they may not always be able to talk about that. So that's one of the things that we really want to open a dialogue to, talking about how can we have these conversations with young people that will help them better be able to share what they need in order to feel safe, because right now it's completely up to the state. The other flip side of that is the minute you turn 18, you go from being a full-on victim to being a full-on criminal. One of the women that we provided services for was an 18-year-old. She was arrested 2 weeks after she turned 18 She had a 17-year-old that she had discovered at a bus stop. She had brought her into her home. The girl was trading sex. They were there together. She was charged with sex trafficking. She did 5 years in prison and has been sentenced to 25 years of sex offender probation. Needless to say, it's a very difficult story to hear, but she was a minor herself when she was first got involved in the industry. She had experienced severe forms of abuse and neglect and substance abuse and just all of the intersecting things that were there. So incarceration just doesn't help. It doesn't help trauma victims, and it doesn't help trafficking victims. We really want to center the survivor. We really want to center the person who has been harmed. We really want to make sure that we are providing adequate and appropriate services and support for people who are trading sex and have also experienced sexual violence. That's incredibly important to us. Melanie, would you like to open the floor for questions?
Absolutely. I have the chat box pulled up, so we are very, very receptive to that. And what time do we end, Rachel? Because right now it's almost 1:30, so we definitely have time for discussion.
Definitely. So I would say at the latest, 2 Eastern is when we would end, but whatever feels best to everyone, we can end whenever.
All right, so let's see if there are any questions, and we will see how long that takes if yes.
As an anecdote, I guess, I believe it was Friday, in anticipation of this and in anticipation of June 2nd, I posted on my personal Twitter account that I have been doing sex work since 1984 and I have never been assaulted by a client. However, I have been assaulted by a cop, a bondsman, and an attorney. So ask me how I feel about Nordic model interventions. And the result of that tweet was my first ever going viral. And it was kind of terrifying. But the responses were completely varied and often a little bit of off topic. People did not know what the Nordic model was. They did not know what the Swedish model was. They didn't know the difference between criminalization and legalization and decriminalization and all of these really complicated things that go into it.
Actually, Alex, can we ask the attendees then if they do know what the difference is between the models?
Yes, we can. There are 4 models of criminalization in the world. I'm sure there's probably more and special little stigma and discrimination that goes along with those. But there is criminalization, which is full criminalization. Everybody involved in the trading of sex gets arrested. There is what they call partial decriminalization or Nordic model information. Yes, we are a support line that accepts volunteers. There is the partial criminalization, which is often called the Nordic model. It is actually officially the Swedish model, but people don't often recognize that. And it's where the person who is selling services is not arrested, but the person who is buying services is arrested. The idea behind that is it's sort of a knee-jerk reaction to the whole trafficking conversation. It's really important for the criminal justice service system to have a criminal and a victim. And they don't have a lot of room for gray area. And unfortunately, there's a lot of gray area that I think is within the whole world, but there's a lot of gray area that we know about. So partial decriminalization is sort of ridiculous because you are taking an adult consensual transaction and criminalizing half of it. It's like having a peanut butter and jelly with no jelly. And so it's very confusing. Then we also have legalization, and legalization is what you're probably familiar with in Germany, in Australia, a few counties in Nevada, and that is where someone gets a license to go to work in a legal brothel or a legalized industry. And the problem with that from our perspective is that it raises the barrier for people who are trading sex in order to survive. It raises those barriers because they are not able to go down and pay to be fingerprinted at the sheriff's stations, or they're too intimidated by that. Being able to have control of your own body is just something that's incredibly helpful when you want to get in and when you want to get out as well. We are not deaf to the fact that we need to spend more time talking with people about exit strategies. And one of our goals for 2022 is to create a comprehensive exit strategy that will help people who have been involved in sex work by their own volition or through forced or coercion, or that was working for them and now it's not, and now they've got to figure out what they need to do. Melanie has posted some very helpful things in the chat. Bella has always posted the most amazing stuff. The 4 models, it's a YouTube video, so that'll make it really easy. Everybody should really like that. Someone is asking, I'm gonna have to put my glasses on, I'm sorry. What concrete steps can organizations take to advocate for a more sensitive approach to how law enforcement interacts with those involved in the commercial sex industry, especially within dealing with young sex workers who may have started when they were underage but are suddenly criminalized? Oh gosh, yeah, that's just the most difficult one. You know, outreach and harm reduction and all of these concrete steps are not concrete, they're squishy. We have to be willing to build relationships that are built on trust and dignity and treating people with respect. These are the strategies that we have to work to be as people, so that we bring them into our organizations and that we bring them back into our community. Compassion, but not sympathy, not feeling
Empathy.
sorry for someone.
Yeah,
understanding how they feel and understanding that they may not be able to make a full turnaround within the next 15 minutes, which is, you know, I mean, we can't stay out on outreach forever, you know, so make sure that you've always got condoms, make sure you always have cigarettes. It gives you an opportunity to build a relationship with people who are involved in street work, with people who are involved in the community. And when someone says, you know, that they're a sex worker or that they're a gig worker or they're a stripper or whatever, try not to be, you know, like so interested that it becomes overwhelming. I can guarantee everyone on this webinar today and everyone who will watch in the future knows someone, loves someone who is a sex worker. And if you don't know that they're a sex worker, it's because they have determined that you are not a safe place to share that information. And it's going to make it really difficult for you to provide respectful and dignified assistance with them. So we just want to encourage people to treat the people that you're serving, the way that you would want to be treated if you were in a similar situation. You know, be compassionate and understanding and help them create their own case plan. One of the projects that SWOP has been trying to launch this year has been a self-directed case management system. And it sounds really awesome. And I really think that this is going to be amazing if we ever get it to work like it's supposed to.
It takes practice.
Yes, it
does. Repetition.
Yes.
We have to keep doing it. It's new.
And what we do is we have basically a menu of services. People can fill out their own request for case management. And very often we are able to meet those short-term needs, and we are able to connect them with other organizations who provide different kinds of things. And it's really been very helpful because people are able to say, oh, yeah, I want to get my own apartment, but I don't have identification. So that's someplace where we can step in and we can say, let's help you get your identification. You know, I've been involved in doing work with people who are coming out of jail since 2008, and it never fails, but I'll pick up somebody at the bus stop when they've been released from prison, or, you know, at the jail after they've gotten bonded out. I'll pick them up and they'll sit down and we'll talk for a little bit. We'll go through a drive-through, and it doesn't take very long before there they are sitting to me in their prison slides and, you know, the outfit that they were arrested in. They turn to me and say, gosh, I want to do what you do. And I'm like, well, let's get your ID first. You know, so I really believe that the empowerment model, when we're talking to people who have been involved in sex trade, whether it be victims, survivors, sex workers, people who are 100% consensual, 100% victimized, whatever, that we treat them with dignity and respect, and that we empower them to take charge of their own lives and make their own changes at their own pace. Everybody has different challenges. We have services that people need to have. They need to have healthcare. They need to have access to housing. They need to feel like their lives are stabilized a little bit. And we can't keep asking broken communities to fix the broken community. So that's where, you know, we hope that this will be very helpful. Yes, the SWOP line does absolutely take volunteers. We do not have a rigorous training program, but we do have an awesome admin who has the answer to almost everything when it comes to the community support line calls. So any of our volunteers who sign on and decide that they want to take a shift on either the chat for support line, or if they want to take part in answering the actual physical line, definitely hit us up. There's a volunteer form on our website. You can fill it out. We'll send you the information and we'll talk about it. I'm a law clerk. Oh gosh, yes, darling, we hear you. One of the things that we want to do in 2022 is we want to be able to provide education and information to people who are within the criminal justice system. We can keep screaming to the void and not having anyone pay attention, or we can get inside the criminal justice system and work from within. So as a law clerk or a judge's clerk or a public defender or a state attorney's social worker within the public defender's office, as a clerk who is working at the clerk of court, even, it would be helpful for people to know how to do how to talk to people and where to refer them and what organizations do what. Yes, organizations start conversations, and that's what makes change possible. The more we communicate, the more we are. Charleston Pro Bono Legal Services. Charleston, yes, absolutely. We love our folks up there. We have a lot of people in prison.
Alex is in Florida. I'm in Pennsylvania. So wait, Charleston, South Carolina? Yeah. Is that?
Yeah, it's South Carolina.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Yes. Decrim. Did that answer your question about concrete steps? Me saying that there weren't any concrete steps? Was that helpful? They're squishy. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for your time today. We really appreciate it. My name is Alex. My email address is alex@SWOP Behind Bars. You can follow me on Twitter on my civilian account, which doesn't usually post a lot of sex work stuff. You'll just see a lot of stuff about golden retrievers, but occasionally something happens there. And that's @SaneSurvivor. I am a survivor of exploitation. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I have been a sex worker since 1984, and I have been involved in advocacy since 2008. I've been incarcerated. I've been assaulted. I've been held at gunpoint. There's a lot of stuff that I've been through, and it's only been through the good folks who work for social service organizations and lots of therapy that I'm able to continue doing all of this work. In addition to DCRIM, what policy initiatives would be the most beneficial to sex worker communities? This is a great question. One of the things would be if we could all report violence without fear of arrest.
Absolutely.
If the cops would stop having sex with the people that they were targeting for arrest during their sting operations, that would be extremely helpful.
I think backing up and explaining that it is not illegal for law enforcement to sexually interact with potential sex trafficking victims or people in the sex industry during investigations. It's something that's only become a discussion over the last few years, especially in Alaska, California, Hawaii. Pennsylvania has been involved in that discussion, but that is something that is still kind of a gray area right now. So yeah.
And another thing that is extremely helpful is not using misdemeanor petty kind of things in order to arrest sex workers. Things like loitering for the purposes of prostitution, or you have too many condoms. Grown-ass women should be able to carry around as many condoms as they want. We feel like that's a really important thing. So those are things that are small bites into the big apple of decriminalization. In addition to decrim, and then how about looking into developing a self-directed mindfulness program, which touches on setting up and putting into practice a meditation approach to aiding those who are in or about to leave their incarceration. It's meditation or mediation?
Rachel?
Meditation?
I think meditation, yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely support the idea of meditation, positive interactions, positive affirmations.
Yeah, meditation is definitely a part of
yeah.
quality of life, but it's not part of prevention or the getting services to people. It's not an essential service. It's a quality of life elective. Yes.
That's very true, but I'm not sure that it should be. It seems like mindfulness and talking about meditation. I'll be honest with you. All of the young women that I have dealt with when they're coming out of prison, the idea of stopping for 10 minutes and just meditating is horrifying to them.
Yeah.
They feel like they've got to be doing something all the time, and it's usually something harmful. So those are the things that we would like to put into practice. SWOP does have a weekly sex worker positive therapy on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock in the evening. That's Central Standard Time.
Well, I will say the person who asked that question, he and I have a daily meditation at 5 a.m. every morning and have been doing so with a small grouping of people for approximately 6 months. That is something that I have offered to have anybody interested in access. So far, we've not had a strong response from the sex work community or the survivor community. One, it is purposely very early in the morning. It's an intentional effort to get up and be present as able, but it is a free offering. And if anybody would like information about that, they are absolutely welcome to email.
I would love to be a part of that. I am usually meditating with a cup of coffee at 5 a.m.
As long as you're sitting still while you drink it.
Okay. All right. I'll accept that.
Okay.
So another question is, while incarcerated, what group programs were helpful to you during your time? What aspects of these group programs were helpful? Trauma-informed care, safety intervention, housing opportunities upon release, etc. The things that were the most helpful to me were letter writing, having someone to communicate with, having a lot of books to read. I didn't really get into self-help books, believe it or not, until I went to jail the first time. And that is where I discovered what is still to this day one of my most favorite self-help books. And that is one of the things that I've really I really think is important. Because of my experience, SWOP Behind Bars started an Amazon wish list for our incarcerated members. We also provide free GEDs to prisons who may have the ability to test people once they've done, but they don't have the funding to provide them with the tutoring. The reading of books. Reading is so incredibly important. And I do think that it has a lot of value to the self, even if it's just a novel. It is something that you're doing for recreation. It's something that you're doing to kind of settle yourself, and it kind of gets you visual and inside the story. So those are things that are very helpful. This group's programs, they didn't talk about trauma-informed, wasn't a thing when I was in jail. Safety intervention, the only housing opportunities were halfway houses or shelters, which things really haven't changed that much since then. But the trauma-informed is very helpful if you're not just saying the words trauma informed.
Yeah, the repetition of trauma informed over and over can be as traumatic as the experience of, but the actual programs are usually excellent if they can be executed.
Yes, execution is everything. Execution is everything. So if you're going to be trauma informed, it can't just be a something that you put on your website. You actually have to practice the idea of trauma informed. This is an issue that we're running into a lot with the harm reduction groups, syringe exchanges that are now becoming legal. They want to do all this data collection. I had a group approach me from Tampa, and they're all ready to go give out, thousands and thousands and thousands of syringes on street outreach, but they want them to answer this 50-question survey so that they can get registered for the program. And that's just not helpful. It's just not helpful at all. That's yours right now. Answering a 50-question survey is just not helpful. There are programs in support of incarcerated people called Prison Project. Yes, those are wonderful. Yes, and we do send a lot of books about yoga, a lot of magazines. We have several prisoners who have taken to doing their own yoga and meditation workshops actually in the prison. Now, obviously, a lot of these shut down a lot, which during COVID, so people weren't doing them nearly as often, but that is something that when we find someone who has a lot of interest in meditation and yoga or some sort of healing intervention, regardless of what it is, we try to support them by providing them with the resources and the support they need in order to do that.
I will note that in many situations, there is still a faith-based model in place, and that it's not always welcome to go too deep into that. And I think that's something that should be discussed at a later time and not in this discussion, please.
Caroline, that is such a great question. Melanie, while I'm talking about this subject, will you get the link to the
Do the math?
The podcast about the girl who won the settlement with the police officer? You did the initial interview.
Oh, Donna Sanford.
Yes, Donna Sanford. I'm sorry, my brain is just not completely functional today. Yes, we have seen sex workers successfully report to police with their harassment or misconduct. Donna Sanford is an excellent example, and Melanie is going to be putting the link to this podcast interview that we did with her in the chat. I'm super glad to be able to talk about this because she was actually assaulted by a police officer who arrested her at the police station. And she was able to talk him down because she really felt like he was going to kill him. And because she didn't live there, she felt comfortable going to the FBI, making a report, and suing the city for harassment. I believe that he was fired, and I believe that he did go to prison. I'm not positive about that. Melanie will definitely have better information on that. That is an unusual case. Most of the time, sex workers are not believed when they report harassment or misconduct, or it's dismissed by higher ups. I live in the Orlando area. The Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation has repeatedly been very difficult with sex workers and exploitative. And they are trying to get better, but it's really hard when it's kind of ingrained in the culture of the organization. And that particular vice squad has just had a lot of real complications. Were you able to find that, Melanie? I know, I'm sorry to toss that at you. So
yeah, I just didn't know if when I'm looking on the computer, if that is an intrusion into everybody's screen. So I'm going to do it this way.
Hello, Mattress Express.
Yes, I think probably the best thing to do when you hear that sex workers are reporting to police, or if you hear about sex workers experiencing violence, simply ask them how you can help, and then listen to what they have to say. There it is. Yeah, this is a really awesome episode on our podcast. It's an all in a day sex work, and it's the episode number 29. There's
Right,
another
sorry, I put
excellent.
1 November. It's November 11th, 2020 from it's season 1 space, November 11th, 2020. We also have a situation where a family whose daughter was murdered by a vice officer was recently compensated about $1 million. There had been a great delay in getting any kind of investigation into their daughter's death. That would be Donna Castleberry Dalton. And she was shot in numerous times in an unmarked car that was sealed against a wall, where it was unclear if she even understood why she was in the company of an undercover officer who had not identified himself. There was a protest for a grand jury investigation into the situation. And finally, then, yeah, the family was awarded $1 million. So I'll also put that up in a moment.
It's always wonderful to have these wins where people are getting awarded for, but it's a grievous assault.
Yeah, is that really a win?
I'm sure that they would rather have their family member back. I'm sure that they would rather have not been assaulted. I'm sure that, all of those things can be true. What COVID has done is it has exposed the gaps in our systems. It's let us know that there are a lot of things that we're falling short on. And I think that COVID gave us an opportunity to determine how we can do better to serve our communities. The ones that include sex workers, the ones who include victims, and the ones who include survivors. And we need to all be in this together to make sure that people are getting the best quality care that they possibly can, and that they feel like they do have a safe place. And if you feel like someone won't talk to you for whatever reason, you have someone that you can have them talk to. You can have them call me, you can have them call Melanie, you can have them call our support line. There's just a lot of really great things that we can all do when we all work together. And that's really my big takeaway from almost everything is let's all work together to provide better services and support for people who are not in their best life at the time.
And it's a learning experience. So I'll say as I'm learning how to be able to work with the case support and case management. If people have any kind of suggestions or resources they would like to pass on to me, I definitely am seeking to have enriched ability to serve the communities in need. Rachel, is there anything that you'd like to add as far as PAVE's position with what we have been working on?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you both for your time today. This was incredibly informative, and I think that the attendance and the comment section really reflects how much people want to know more about the VIMINAL space, and I completely agree with everything you've said. I really appreciate you all speaking on the law enforcement side of things as well. From a survivor perspective, I've dealt with a lot of survivors that have been assaulted by law enforcement, and reporting is just such a barrier, I think, when the perpetrator is coming from law enforcement. So thank you for kind of speaking on that issue as well. And we obviously, support sex workers and also survivors of human trafficking. So thank you for kind of explaining the difference between consensual sex work and then human trafficking or sex trafficking. And thank you just so much for being here today and for this incredible conversation. And thank you to all of our panel or our attendees for the questions that you've been asking and for being so engaging in the comment section. This was just an incredible conversation. And thank you, Alex and Melanie, for your work with SWOP Behind Bars. I'm excited to continue this partnership and this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
We're glad to be here.
Awesome. If anyone has any additional questions, if you have any questions that didn't get answered today or any that come up after the presentation, feel free to email me. My name is Rachel, and @pavingtheway.net is my email. So Rachel@pavingtheway.net, or Melanie and Alex, if y'all are open to emails, if you want to
put my email in. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Oh, perfect. Holy shite. Seriously.
We need a volunteer at SWOP Chicago. So that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, forming new relationships that work to
Mhm.
empower the public position on things is very helpful, because right now the relationship between the communities has been very challenged, and the more empathy that there is, I believe the better that will go.
Great work, PAVE.
Thank you. Great work to you both as well.
Yeah, celebrating all. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for being here today, and for your wonderful presentation and amazing voices, and for your work. Please reach out if you have any additional questions from the attendees. We will always be here for you. And thank you again to Melanie and Alex. It was so lovely to have you here today, and Alex, to meet you, because we haven't met face to face yet. So just thank you again from the bottom of my heart, and I hope to talk to you both very soon.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bless, be
Thank you so
welcome.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye.